What happens when the very CEO who built an empire to fight inequality is rejected by her own bank? Imagine being turned away by your own creation, not because you're unqualified, but because of the color of your skin. This shocking story unfolds with Erica Johnson, a black CEO, who experiences the very discrimination she spent her life fighting against. Erica Johnson didn't just build Pioneer Financial, she built it to break down barriers. Growing up in a working-class family, she watched as her parents were denied loans time and time again, simply because of their race. That moment burned deep within her, driving her to create a bank that would never turn people away based on the color of their skin. But one ordinary day, Erica walked into a branch of her own bank, casually dressed, no security, no entourage, just a woman with a loan application. What happened next stunned her. She was rejected, dismissed, and kicked out like any other black customer. The institution she built to combat discrimination had become a part of the problem. Erica Johnson walked into the small, familiar corner cafe near Pioneer Financial's flagship branch, hoping to grab a quick cup of coffee before heading into another long day of meetings. As she reached for a carton of milk on the shelf, a conversation from the next aisle pierced through the quiet hum of the cafe. At first it was just background noise, a murmur of voices, but then words began to sink in, heavy with frustration. Even Pioneer turned me down. They claim to be all about community, but I've done everything right. Everything they asked. And still, no loan, one voice said, the bitterness cutting through every syllable. Erica froze. Her hand, still holding the milk carton, hung in the air as she tried to process what she was hearing. Her heart began to pound in her chest, each beat like a warning. She turned her head slightly, pretending to study the shelf, trying to see the two men speaking without being noticed. They were both well-dressed, in their 30s, their faces a mix of weariness and frustration. "I've got an excellent credit score," the other voice chimed in. "Solid business plan, collateral in place." Yet I walked out of their office with nothing. And then some white guy walks in after me, same loan amount, and gets approved on the spot. He paused, shaking his head, unable to hide the anger in his voice. It's like they have a quota. One black business owner a month, and that's it. Diversity, that's just for the brochures and the press releases. It's the same prejudice, just wrapped in nicer packaging. Erica's chest tightened. She had built Pioneer Financial to be different. She had built it with the dream of offering opportunities to people who had been systematically denied, just like her parents had been years ago. But here she was, hearing with her own ears the same disappointment, the same systemic failure, coming from the very place she had worked so hard to transform. Her own creation, the bank she had poured her soul into, was being discussed this way, by people who had come for help and left with only their dignity bruised. The words felt like daggers. How could this be happening in her bank? How could Pioneer Financial, a bank that had become a symbol of change, have fallen into the very trap it was designed to fight? She placed the carton of milk in her basket, her appetite gone, her mind racing. For a moment, Erica stood still, the weight of what she had just heard threatening to consume her. As she slowly walked toward the checkout counter, the words of the two men replayed in her mind. She had always believed Pioneer was different. She had always believed that her bank was a sanctuary, a place where people could go to get a fair shot. But now she was unsure. The contrast between the mission statement on the wall of Pioneer Financial and what she had just overheard was too stark. It felt like a cruel joke. She knew that Pioneer was supposed to be a safe haven for all, a place where the barriers of race, class, and background could be left at the door. But she also knew that the reality she was facing right now was something much darker. That night, back in her office, Erica stared at the framed mission statement that had once inspired her every decision. Financial opportunity for all communities, it read in elegant, gold calligraphy. The words on the page seemed to mock her now. What was the point of a slogan if the institution it represented was still perpetuating the very problem it was meant to solve? Erica sat in silence, her fingers tracing the edge of the frame. The bank had grown. Pioneer Financial had become one of the most successful institutions in the country, with more than 100 branches nationwide. But she was left questioning everything she thought she had built. Her thoughts kept returning to those two men in the cafe. She had promised herself that Pioneer would be different, that no one would ever walk into her bank and be turned away just because of the color of their skin. But clearly, something had gone horribly wrong. Erica's resolve hardened. She had to find out for herself what was happening. She couldn't just rely on reports or secondhand accounts. She needed to see the truth with her own eyes to experience the system that had once been the answer to all of her dreams. And so she made a decision. She would go undercover. She would disguise herself, walk into one of her own branches, and see if the same prejudice that had been whispered in the cafe was alive and well behind those polished marble floors. Her heart raced with determination. This was no longer just about running a successful bank. It was about standing up for what she had always believed in. It was about making sure that no one, no matter their race or background, would ever again feel the sting of discrimination in Pioneer Financial. The next morning, Erica made preparations to transform herself. What she was about to do was bold, daring, and it would change everything. The following morning, Erica woke up early, her mind set with a singular purpose. It was time to see the truth, the real truth. Not the polished reports that sat in front of her on her desk, but the raw, unfiltered reality of what was happening in the very bank she had worked so hard to build. As she sat in front of the mirror, Erica could hardly recognize the woman staring back at her. She had already spent hours the night before making preparations, new clothes, a subtle shift in her appearance that would make her unrecognizable to her own employees. She wasn't sure what she was more afraid of, the deception it took to hide her identity, or the possibility that everything she had worked for might crumble beneath her. The makeup artist she hired worked silently, carefully altering her features. It was the most surreal experience of Erica's life, sitting there watching herself transform into someone she didn't recognize. She hadn't worn facial hair before, but now a thin line of stubble along her jawline gave her a sharper, more unfamiliar look. She replaced her custom designer glasses with a pair of thick, cheap frames and exchanged her tailored suit for a loose-fitting button-down in khakis. The transformation was complete when she practiced walking in front of the mirror, rounding her shoulders slightly and shifting her posture to something smaller, more timid. She looked like a completely different person, but it was what she needed to do. For the first time in a long while, Erica didn't feel like the confident CEO who walked into boardrooms with the weight of a company on her shoulders. Instead, she felt like an ordinary customer, a person whose worth would be judged by the color of her skin rather than her qualifications. As she walked toward Pioneer Financial's flagship branch in downtown Chicago, the city bustling around her heart pounded louder with every step. She wasn't just walking into any bank today. She was walking into the heart of her empire, the very institution she had built to stand as a beacon of fairness. She was about to see for herself if her bank truly held the values it had been built on, or if it had fallen prey to the same prejudices she had vowed to dismantle. The lobby of the flagship branch stood before her, gleaming and imposing, a symbol of success that had always made her proud. But today it felt foreign. The security guard at the door didn't even look at her as she walked in. No nod of recognition, no smile. She was just another face in the crowd, another person who would be judged, and she felt it in every inch of her being. Erica approached the welcome desk where a receptionist, Alicia, sat typing away. She stood there for nearly 30 seconds, waiting for any form of acknowledgement. When Alicia finally looked up, her gaze flickered over Erica without any recognition, and she asked in a flat tone, "Can I help you?" Erica took a breath, steadying herself. She wasn't just a customer. She was the founder of this place. But for now, she had to pretend. "Yes, I have an appointment to discuss a business loan. My name is Williams, David Williams." Alicia glanced briefly at her computer screen before shoving a clipboard toward her, saying, "Fill this out and bring it back when you're done. Someone will get to you when they can." No warmth, no acknowledgement of the appointment, no effort to make her feel like she mattered. Just another transaction. Erica glanced around, and the contrast couldn't have been clearer. A well-dressed white man walked in, and within moments he was greeted with enthusiasm. "Mr. Kensington, so wonderful to see you again." Samantha, the senior customer service representative, greeted him with a wide smile, extending her hand. "How's your daughter? I heard she graduated from Harvard. Such an accomplishment. Erica watched in stunned silence as the man was ushered immediately to a loan officer's desk. His qualifications, his needs, everything about him was prioritized. He was treated like an old friend. Yet here she was, a successful businesswoman, ignored and shoved into the corner to fill out forms like an ordinary applicant. Minutes passed, 20 then 30, while Erica watched as other white customers walked in after her, greeted warmly, escorted immediately to loan officers. A young black couple sat nearby, clearly frustrated, glancing at their watches as time ticked away. The disparity in treatment was so obvious, so painful, that Erica could hardly sit still. But she knew she had to be patient. She was here to observe, to understand the full extent of the discrimination. Finally, after nearly 40 minutes, her name was called. "Mr. Williams?" Alicia's voice was flat, almost dismissive, as she glanced at Erica's paperwork without looking her in the eye. Erica stood and made her way to Derek Thompson's desk, the senior loan officer who had been part of the company since its early days. She had watched him receive awards and recognition for his work in the bank. But today, Erica saw him for what he truly was, a man who, whether knowingly or unknowingly, perpetuated the very inequality she had sworn to eliminate. The moment Erica sat down, Derek's demeanor shifted. The smile he had readily offered Mr. Kensington vanished. He barely acknowledged her presence, dismissing her with a vague gesture toward the chair, while he continued to type on his computer, not making eye contact. "Have a seat," he said curtly. As Erica watched the subtle dismissals pile up, she began to realize the extent of what she was witnessing. This was not just bad customer service. It was systemic bias, a bias that had somehow taken root in the very place she had worked so hard to build. It was in that moment, as she sat there facing the man who had the power to decide her future, that Erica knew this was no longer about just one loan or one bad experience. It was about the soul of Pioneer Financial, and it was at risk of being lost. Erica sat across from Derek Thompson, a seasoned loan officer who had been with Pioneer Financial for years. The room felt colder now, quieter, as if the weight of her transformation had pressed down on the air itself. She watched Derek's hands as he absent-mindedly shuffled papers, his eyes glued to his computer screen. A tense silence hung in the air, thick with unspoken words. This wasn't the first time Erica had sat across from someone in this very office. She had seen this room countless times, filled with confidence, pride, and purpose. But today, as she sat in the chair that had never once felt foreign to her, it felt almost suffocating. The disguise, the nervous energy swirling in her chest, in the cold reception, everything was too much. Derek's nonchalance, the way he didn't even look up at her when she spoke, confirmed what Erica had begun to fear. This was not a coincidence. This was the system, and it was broken. Erica took a deep breath, her voice calm, though her hands gripped the armrest tightly. "I'm applying for a business expansion loan for $100,000. I've included all my documents, business plans, financial projections, and collateral." She leaned forward slightly, trying to keep the conversation professional, yet the words felt hollow in her mouth. This wasn't just any loan. This wasn't a transaction. It was an experiment, a test to see if the promises of fairness had ever really been realized in Pioneer Financial, or if it had all been a lie. Derek didn't respond. He didn't even glance at her business plan. His eyes were still glued to the screen, fingers rapidly typing, absorbed in whatever was on his monitor. Erica's heart pounded louder in her chest, but she refused to let the unease show. Her years of experience in the corporate world had taught her one thing. No matter how hard things got, she would always find her way through. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Derek looked up, but his expression wasn't one of engagement or interest. No, it was one of skepticism. "You're applying for $100,000, he repeated, his tone almost mocking, his eyebrow raised in a silent challenge. "Yes," Erica replied firmly, trying to suppress the rising tide of anger in her chest. "This loan will fund our expansion into 3 new markets. We've already secured preliminary contracts that guarantee over $1.2 million in revenue over the next 18 months. Derek barely looked at the figures, dismissing them as easily as he flipped a page. His eyes, however, didn't miss the small detail he was more interested in. Consulting, huh? He said, his voice dripping with skepticism. Where did you say you got your business experience? Erica's chest tightened. He hadn't even looked at her credentials. Her MBA from Northwestern, her 15 years of experience working with Fortune 500 companies. None of it mattered. Not to Derek. Not in this moment. I've worked in this industry for more than 15 years, Erica said, keeping her voice steady. I have an MBA from Northwestern, and I've held executive positions at 2 Fortune 500 companies. Derek didn't react immediately. Instead, he glanced at her portfolio and muttered something under his breath. Erica's patience was wearing thin. The condescension was blatant. He wasn't even trying to hide it. She had built this company with everything she had. Late nights, sleepless weeks, sacrifice after sacrifice. And now, sitting here, she was being reduced to a second-class citizen because of the color of her skin. His next words hit like a hammer. Northwestern, interesting choice, he said, his eyes narrowing slightly. Full scholarship. Erica didn't miss the implication in his voice. The question wasn't about her academic background. It was about her ability to be successful. Derek was questioning whether a black woman from an underprivileged background could possibly have earned her way. Yes, full scholarship, Erica said, meeting his gaze. And I worked hard to get there. Derek looked at her business plan again, still making no effort to engage in any meaningful conversation about her proposal. His tone shifted to something colder, more dismissive. Let's be honest, Mr. Williams. A loan of this size, well, it's substantial. People from your background, well, they often don't understand financial responsibility the way established business owners do. Erica felt the weight of his words settle in her chest. It wasn't just a simple comment about the loan. It was a direct attack. It was a judgment based on the color of her skin, not her qualifications. My credit score is 815, Erica said, her voice unwavering. I've never missed a payment on any obligation. My business has been profitable every quarter for 8 years. What exactly about my background makes you question my financial responsibility? Derek shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He tried to change the subject, offering her a loan product with higher interest rates and more restrictive terms. We have a special loan program designed for entrepreneurs from diverse backgrounds, he said, his voice falsely warm. The qualification requirements are more flexible. The irony of it hit Erica like a slap in the face. The program was specifically for people like her, people of color, but the terms were worse. The rates were higher. It was nothing more than a way to steer minority applicants toward worse deals, and Derek had no problem offering it to her. I don't need a special loan program, Erica replied, her voice cold. I qualify for your standard loan products, and I expect to be treated as such. Derek's discomfort was palpable. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair, avoiding her gaze. Mr. Williams, he began, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Someone like you, statistically, you're a flight risk. The words hung in the air like a suffocating cloud. Erica's anger flared, but she kept her voice even. Someone like me? She asked slowly, the question leaving her lips like a challenge. Derek fumbled for words. I meant, statistically, based on your demographics? Erica's heart pounded. She wasn't just sitting here as a loan applicant. She was sitting here as the embodiment of everything Derek's bias couldn't accept. She leaned forward. You're saying my race has a direct impact on my ability to repay a loan? The silence that followed was deafening. Derek's face turned crimson. He stammered, No. Of course not. Race isn't a factor. Erica shook her head slowly, knowing the truth. Then why is it that someone like me is being treated so differently? Why is it that my qualifications aren't enough for you, but the man who just walked in, who didn't even need an appointment, is treated like royalty? Derek was caught. There was no escaping it. The evidence was undeniable, right there in front of him. At that moment, Erica knew she couldn't let this stand. Not just for her, but for everyone who had ever walked through the doors of Pioneer Financial with hope, only to be turned away because of their race. The institution she had founded was supposed to be better than this, and now it was time to make sure it would be. With unwavering determination, Erica spoke again, her voice low but firm. "I want to speak to your manager." Erica's words hung in the air like a challenge. The tension in the room was unbearable as Derek squirmed in his chair, trying to avoid her penetrating gaze. She had given him the opportunity to correct his behavior, to step up and prove that Pioneer Financial was the place she had built it to be, fair, just, and free from discrimination. But now as she sat there, the truth was clearer than ever. This was no accident. The systemic discrimination that had quietly infected the bank was alive and well, even in the halls of the institution she had founded. Derek's voice trembled as he stammered, trying to backtrack, trying to cover up the undeniable prejudice that had seeped into every word and action. I didn't mean it like that," he muttered, his face flushed with embarrassment, a mixture of defensiveness and panic clouding his features. "It's just, we have to protect our clients. The bank's interests. Your job is to protect your clients." Erica cut him off, her voice calm but firm. "Not judge them based on their skin color." Derek's eyes darted nervously to the door, as though hoping for some sort of escape. He knew deep down that he was caught. He had just been confronted with his own biases, and they were glaringly obvious. But Erica wasn't done. This wasn't just about him. It was about the system that had allowed him to act with such unchecked prejudice. It was about the bank's culture, the very core of the organization she had built, that had allowed these microaggressions to go unnoticed for far too long. Erica stood up from her seat slowly, her heart pounding with a mixture of anger and determination. She had spent years building Pioneer Financial into something different, a bank that promised opportunity for all, a bank that championed financial equality. But now she saw that the promises had been hollow. The work wasn't done, not by a long shot. "I'll wait for your manager," she said quietly, her eyes unwavering. "I have the right to speak with someone about this, about how I've been treated, and about how this branch has treated others like me." Derek looked stunned. He had expected Erica to crumble. After all, she was just another black applicant, wasn't she? Someone who was supposed to fit the mold, to be ignored and dismissed. But Erica was different. Erica had built this place, and now she would tear through it if that's what it took to fix it. He hesitated, his mind racing. "The branch manager doesn't have time for people who don't qualify." His words were dismissive, but they only fueled Erica's resolve. "I don't care," Erica replied calmly, her voice steady despite the fire burning inside her. "I'll wait. This is my bank, and I deserve to be heard." Derek's face drained of color as he realized the gravity of his mistake. He stood up abruptly, knocking his chair back as though trying to distance himself from the situation. "I've been patient with you, Mr. Williams, but if you're going to make a scene, I'll have to call security." Security. That word hung in the air like a threat, like a final attempt to silence her. But Erica was beyond being silenced. She had spent her life being overlooked, dismissed, and underestimated. Not anymore. "Go ahead," she said, not flinching. "Call them." Moments later, a young security guard named Thomas appeared at the door. His name badge read Thomas in bold letters, but it wasn't the name that mattered. It was the role he had to play. He looked between Erica and Derek, his gaze lingering on the palpable tension in the room. Thomas hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "Mr. Williams, I'll need you to come with me," Thomas said, his voice soft, unsure of what to do. "I'm not leaving," Erica said, her voice unwavering. "I've simply requested to speak with a manager after being discriminated against. I've done nothing wrong." But Derek wasn't done. He stepped forward, his face red with frustration, trying to assert control over the situation. "He's causing a disturbance, Thomas. He's been argumentative throughout the entire meeting." Erica stood tall, her gaze fixed on Derek as she prepared herself for the next move. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about everyone who had walked into Pioneer Financial, hoping for a fair chance, only to leave with their hopes dashed. "Thomas, I understand you're just doing your job," Erica continued, her voice calm, yet filled with a quiet strength. "But I'm asking you to listen, because what's happening here isn't right. I'm being escorted out of my own bank, not because I've broken any rules, but because I'm being treated differently based on my skin color." Thomas looked at Derek, then back at Erica, clearly torn. He didn't want to be the one to throw someone out, especially not someone who seemed to have a quiet authority about them. But Derek's glare pushed him to act. "Sir, I need you to come with me now," Thomas said, his hand hovering over his radio. Erica stood, gathered her paperwork, and walked toward the door, her back straight, her posture resolute. As they passed through the lobby, the conversation between the white couple and the loan officer was loud enough for Erica to hear. "With your qualifications, we can approve up to $200,000 today if you want to expand your budget," the loan officer was saying, a tone of excitement in her voice. Erica's heart ached as she passed the group. The contrast was too stark. The discrimination was so clear, so painfully obvious, it felt like a slap to the face. She had worked so hard for this place, and now she was being treated as less than. The irony of it was almost too much to bear. The woman who had spent years fighting for equality, building a bank for the underserved, was now being let out by security like a criminal. But Erica wasn't broken. She wasn't defeated. She would not let this moment pass without consequences. As she reached the exit doors, she reached into her pocket, pulling out her phone. "I need to make a quick call," Erica said to Thomas, her voice calm but filled with an unshakable confidence. "It will only take a minute." Thomas hesitated, glancing nervously at Derek, who was watching her every move, but nodded. Erica dialed the number she knew by heart, the number that had always been a direct line to the highest levels of Pioneer Financial. The phone rang only once before it was answered. "Eleanor Matthews," came the voice on the other end, crisp and professional. "Eleanor, it's Erica. I'm downstairs in the main branch. I need you here now." There was no hesitation in Eleanor's response. "On my way," she said, the urgency in her voice unmistakable. Erica hung up the phone, turned to Thomas and nodded. "It's about to change." The air in the Pioneer Financial lobby grew thick with anticipation as the doors swung open. Eleanor Matthews, Erica's trusted executive vice president, walked in with the kind of presence that made the entire room pause. Every head turned and every conversation halted as she swept through the space, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. There was no question about Eleanor's authority. She carried it in her posture, in the way she looked at those around her with a level of intensity that commanded respect. Erica stood at the center of the lobby, her arms folded, her face a mask of controlled fury. Beside her, Derek Thompson looked more like a child caught stealing cookies than a seasoned loan officer. His face had drained of color, his mouth opening and closing in disbelief. He couldn't have known what was about to unfold. He thought he had won. He thought he had silenced the black man in front of him, just like every other client before him. But he was wrong, and now the truth was about to come crashing down. Eleanor walked straight up to Derek without even acknowledging his nervous fidgeting. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice cool, but it held the kind of power that made even the boldest men falter. "I presume you're aware of the situation here." Derek barely nodded, his mind racing for any explanation that would save him from the consequences that were clearly coming. His throat tightened, but his words came out in a desperate whisper. I don't understand, Miss Matthews. I didn't mean—" Eleanor raised her hand, silencing him instantly. "Save your excuses, Derek. This is not the time." Her gaze flicked across the room, and everyone in the lobby seemed to shrink under the weight of her words. Then, without looking back at Derek, Eleanor turned to the gathered crowd, employees, customers, witnesses, and spoke to them all. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice unwavering, "what you are about to learn is a lesson in integrity, in leadership, in accountability." Erica stood beside her, steady, her eyes never leaving Derek. For years, she had been the public face of Pioneer Financial. She had delivered speeches, crafted policies, and created an institution that millions trusted. But today, it wasn't just about her. It was about what was right. It was about the injustice that still lingered within the very walls of the institution she had built to fight against that injustice. With a single glance from Eleanor, the screens in the lobby flashed to life. The footage began to play. Grainy at first, but then it came into sharp focus, showing the exact moment Erica had been denied service. The exact moment Derek had dismissed her, questioned her qualifications, and offered her a loan product with higher interest rates because of her race. The video didn't lie. It captured every nuance, every look of disdain, every moment of systemic discrimination. David Gaston, no, Erica Johnson, had been subjected to the very treatment she had promised to eradicate, and now everyone would see it for themselves. The silence in the room was deafening. As the video played, the employees who had been passively complicit in these practices began to look away. Some looked ashamed, their eyes dropping to the floor, unable to meet the gaze of their colleagues. Others shifted uncomfortably, as though they had suddenly realized how deeply they had failed in their duties. The footage ended, and Eleanor turned back to the group. "This is not an isolated incident," she stated, her voice hardening. "We have received over 20 formal complaints regarding discriminatory practices at this branch in the past year alone. But today, we are no longer going to ignore these complaints. We are no longer going to sweep this under the rug." Erica stepped forward, her expression resolute, her voice cutting through the thick silence. "What happened here today isn't just about a single loan application being mishandled," she said, her words laced with emotion. "It's about the foundation of Pioneer Financial and what it stands for. My parents couldn't get a loan. They were denied a chance to build their future because of the color of their skin. And I promised myself, no one, not one person, would ever face that same injustice again in my bank." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But I've learned that promises alone aren't enough. We have to act. We have to hold ourselves accountable, especially when it hurts. And the truth is, Pioneer Financial has failed. We've let this discrimination go unchecked for too long." Derek's face had gone ghostly pale, and his hands trembled as he fumbled with a pen. He looked from Erica to Eleanor to the employees who were beginning to understand the magnitude of what was happening. But there was no escaping the truth anymore. The mask had fallen. Eleanor stepped up, her voice now carrying the weight of finality. "Effective immediately, Mr. Thompson, you are relieved of your duties as senior loan officer. You and Ms. Chen, who was also complicit in this behavior, will no longer be employees of Pioneer Financial. You are dismissed, and you will be escorted from the building immediately." The words were sharp, cutting through the tension like a knife. Derek stood frozen, his mouth hanging open, unable to form any words. The silence was broken only by the soft clicking of Eleanor's heels as she took a step forward. "Thomas," Eleanor said to the young security guard who had been standing off to the side, "please escort Mr. Thompson and Ms. Chen to their offices. They are no longer part of this company." The young security guard, his face marked by the discomfort of the situation, nodded slowly. But this time, he wasn't escorting Erica out. This time, he was escorting the ones who had failed. As Derek and Vivian gathered their belongings in stunned silence, Eleanor turned to the employees who were still gathered in the lobby. "Let this serve as a reminder of the responsibility we have to uphold the values of Pioneer Financial. We are not just a bank. We are a symbol of opportunity, and we will be held accountable for every decision we make. Starting today, Pioneer Financial will implement a new level of transparency in our lending process. We will conduct bias audits at every branch, and no loan application will be processed without a full review. And we will ensure that every employee is trained to recognize and confront bias, no matter where it comes from." Erica watched as the staff slowly absorbed what had just happened. She could see the realization dawning in their eyes. The shame, the guilt, the recognition that they were part of a system that had perpetuated inequality for far too long. But in that moment, Erica knew this was the beginning of a new chapter, not just for Pioneer Financial, but for the entire banking industry. She had fought to build a space of equality, and now she was fighting to reclaim it. "Thank you, Eleanor," Erica said quietly, her voice filled with gratitude. Eleanor gave her a brief, knowing nod. "This is just the beginning. We've got a lot of work ahead of us, but we'll get it right, together." As the room began to clear, Erica felt a weight lift off her shoulders. The battle wasn't over, but this was the turning point. The day Pioneer Financial had taken its first steps toward redemption, and Erica once again was at the helm, ready to steer it toward a brighter, more equitable future. The afternoon sun streamed through the large glass windows of the Pioneer Financial headquarters, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Erica stood alone in the main conference room, her fingers brushing the edge of the table, where just hours before, the fate of her bank had been decided. The weight of the day pressed down on her. Yet for the first time in years, it wasn't the weight of the company's expectations, but the weight of a promise she had made long ago to herself. What had started as a painful confrontation had blossomed into something else. A moment of reckoning, not just for Derek or Vivian, but for every person within the bank who had stood by silently while injustice was allowed to fester. Erica knew that today had been a turning point. The kind of turning point that didn't just change policies, it changed hearts. She thought back to the look on the faces of her employees when Eleanor had revealed the footage. The guilt, the shame, the disbelief. Many of them had known there were problems, but they had never truly seen it for themselves. The shock on their faces had been palpable. Some looked away, unable to face the truth. Others held their gaze as though for the first time they were truly seeing what had been in front of them all along. It wasn't just the loan officers who had failed, it was the system, a system built on ideals of equality, but whose foundation had crumbled beneath the weight of unconscious bias and unchecked privilege. The same system that Erica had poured her soul into had betrayed its own values. She had been living in a dream that her bank could rise above the very injustices it had been designed to combat. But now that dream had to be rebuilt. The work had just begun. As she sat down at the head of the conference table, Erica felt the quiet intensity of the room. The silence that had followed the dismissal of Derek and Vivian still hung in the air. She could hear her own breath, steady and strong. She had to be strong, not just for herself, but for all the employees who had just witnessed a seismic shift in their bank's culture. Eleanor's voice broke the silence, her words cutting through the stillness. "We've done the right thing today, Erica, but we can't stop here." Erica nodded slowly, her mind racing. "We have to ensure that this isn't just a one-time event. We have to change the way we do business, from the inside out." Eleanor stepped forward, opening her laptop and turning the screen toward Erica. "I've already been in touch with the board. They're on board with your plan. We're moving forward with comprehensive training on anti-bias, implementing mystery shopper programs, and launching an internal audit of every loan denial in the last year. But it doesn't stop there. We're making sure this isn't a temporary fix." The words were reassuring, but Erica knew it would take more than just training and audits. It would take a cultural shift, a real commitment to examining how deeply embedded biases were woven into the very fabric of Pioneer Financial. She couldn't just ask her employees to change their behavior. She had to change their minds, their hearts. They had to see why it mattered, why it was more than just a policy, why it was a moral imperative. "This is bigger than just us, Eleanor," Erica said, her voice firm. "This is about the future of the communities we serve. It's about restoring the trust we've lost and creating a legacy that will last. We can't just be another bank that talks about fairness. We have to be the example." Eleanor nodded, a look of understanding passing between them. "And we will be. We'll make it right. For the Johnsons, for every person who has walked into this bank and been turned away or given less because of the color of their skin. We'll make sure Pioneer Financial stands for something real. We'll make sure we lead the way in this industry." As the conversation continued, Erica couldn't help but feel a sense of hope beginning to take root. The work ahead of them was monumental, but it was also necessary. They had uncovered a truth that couldn't be ignored, and now it was time to act. For every person who had ever walked through Pioneer Financial's doors with hope in their eyes, there had to be action, real, tangible change. The next day, the entire bank was called into a meeting. The energy in the air was charged with a nervous anticipation, but Erica was ready. She stepped up to the podium in front of the employees, her posture straight, her expression resolute. This wasn't the same woman who had walked into the branch in disguise just days before. This woman stood before them as the embodiment of the change she was demanding. "The footage you saw yesterday wasn't just about one loan officer's actions," she began, her voice carrying throughout the room. "It was about the system that allowed that behavior to happen. It was about a culture that let people, good people, believe that this kind of behavior was acceptable. And it stops now." She paused, letting her words sink in, allowing the weight of her statement to settle. "I built Pioneer Financial with the dream that this bank would be a place where opportunity is equal for all. I promised my parents that I would create something better. I promised them that no one would ever again face the kind of discrimination they did when they tried to secure a loan. And I failed to see the cracks in the system I created. But now we're going to fix it. Together. Erica looked out at the sea of faces. Some who were ashamed, some who were unsure, but all who knew something had to change. The future of this bank depends on each of you. It depends on our willingness to take responsibility and make things right. Starting today, we will be accountable for every loan, every interaction, and every decision that is made. We will hold ourselves to a higher standard, and we will lead by example. As the meeting ended, Erica felt the shift begin. She could see it in their eyes. There was no turning back. They had seen the truth, and now they had a choice: to rise to the occasion and rebuild Pioneer Financial into the institution it was always meant to be, or to continue down the path of complacency. She knew they would rise, because the truth had a way of awakening the soul, and the time for change was now. The story of Erica and Pioneer Financial is more than just about corporate accountability. It's a powerful reminder that integrity, fairness, and transparency must be at the heart of everything we do, whether in business or in life. It teaches us that the fight for equality is not just about grand gestures or policies. It's about recognizing the subtle biases that often go unnoticed and making the conscious choice to correct them. In our personal lives, we can take this lesson to heart by reflecting on our own actions and beliefs. Are we unintentionally perpetuating biases? Are we treating others with the respect and fairness they deserve? It's never too late to change the way we view the world and those around us. Just as Erica stepped up to lead her bank toward a better future, we too can make small, meaningful changes in our daily lives to create a more inclusive and just society. For those of us who have seen many seasons of life, this story reminds us that the fight for what's right doesn't stop with age. The wisdom of experience can be a guiding light for future generations. Let's make it our mission to continue learning, growing, and leading by example, ensuring that every individual is treated with dignity and fairness. Let's embrace the power of change. It's never too late to be the difference we wish to see. Join me in making today the day we stand up for what's right.